Hello again. Welcome back to attempt number 2 at this workshop live stream. So apologies if you were here beforehand. It did not quite work out the way that I was planning to. I think I figured out what was going on, so I am crossing my fingers that this time around everything will be smooth, everything will be ready to go. So yeah, we're gonna try this again, and we're gonna be starting it from the top. So hello everybody, good evening from the Midwest. I am really excited to be getting into this workshop with TouchDesigner. It is going to be a fun one. As you can see in the background behind me, we're going to be experimenting with, again, tops, visuals, and animations, as well as how we can tile things and make things look like almost like a little kaleidoscope kind of effect going on. A couple of things I want to just preface this with is this is going to be very similar to a previous workshop that I did a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago. 3 or 4 weeks, I don't remember when I did it. It was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So if you were tuned in for that session, then it's going to be pretty similar as far as the concepts we're going to be covering. The difference here is really just we'll be talking about a couple of different texture operators that we did not talk about in the first session. So there will definitely be some new things we'll be covering here, new things that we'll be learning about. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm going to move a little bit quicker in this workshop. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time explaining the fundamentals of TouchDesigner and some of the things that I'm doing. But really, this is going to be more so a show and tell. I'm going to be showing you some of the parameters that are the most commonly used within the program, and I'll be stopping at a few key operators and just explaining some of the special ones that we'll be taking a look at today. So with that being said, at some point in this stream, I'm going to be talking about my new mini course, which I am really excited to be launching today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and drop the link to the landing page for the mini course in the chat. And we're going to talk about it at some point in the middle of this. We'll take a little break somewhere in the middle, and then we'll go ahead and talk about, I'll walk us through it. We'll talk about the course, and I'll kind of just break down what it's going to be all about. But right now, I just dropped the link in the chat, so you are welcome to go ahead and just take a sneak peek, take a look at the landing page, go through all the information while we're going around in this workshop. And if you have any questions that come up for you or anything that is on your mind, feel free to drop those in the chat. And what I'm going to do is I'll kind of be using that as a little Q&A. So once we get to that portion of the stream, I'll be answering your questions then. Cool. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into TouchDesigner. And let's get started with this really fun, really cool network that we have going on here. I should also mention, if at any point there is any issues with audio, or you notice the stream is starting to stutter or lag or just stop, please let me know in the chat. I'll be doing my best to monitor the situation. I have a few different monitoring tools that I can use just to make sure everything is going smoothly. But if you do notice there's any issues, definitely highlight those in the chat. And yeah, we'll take a pause and troubleshoot. But crossing my fingers, everything today goes smoothly. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pause this really nice background music for a second and talk to you about TouchDesigner. So here's what we're going to be building today. So it is going to be an AudioReactive visual, and there's going to be quite a few components are going to be coming together for this sample here. You probably you should be hearing the audio, and it is a pretty standard audio track by TouchDesigner. Whenever you first add the operator that is in charge of playing audio, this is the default sound that gets played. So we're going to be using that for now. You are welcome once we get to that point to try out different tracks and see where that leads you. But audio looks good on my end. And I'm hoping my voice isn't being drowned out by the audio at all. It doesn't look to be the case, but let me know if also it's a little bit hard to hear me. I can definitely tweak the audio, my microphone, in that case. Okay, so here's what we're going to be building, and we're going to be breaking things down in terms of first looking at the visuals. So I do want to first build out the visual, the graphics, and then we'll talk a little bit about animation, and then we'll dive into the audio reactivity portion of this lesson here. So what I'm going to do is, as we're working, I'm going to keep a preview of what we're working towards in the the side view over here. So this is one of the first things that I really part of my workflow and how I work and create things in TouchDesigner is having a preview output off to the side. So if you don't know how to do that yet, then buckle in, because I'm about to show you. So a keyboard shortcut to do this is going to be on Windows, Alt, and then left square bracket. If you're on Mac, it should be Option, left square bracket. If you want to click your way to this page, what you can do, let me just go ahead and close this. What you can do is towards the top right corner of the window, you should see an arrow that's pointing down. You're going to click on that, and then the first option is split left, right. You can also see the keyboard shortcut associated with that to the right. So I'm going to click on that, and what happens is now I get my view split into two. So I have two completely separate panes or windows here. So on the right side, I want to be looking towards the top left of that right half, and there's going to be an upside down triangle. When I hover over it, it says pane type. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to select top viewer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and what I should have done is I should have done this with me inside of my actual editor here. So I'm gonna do that one more time. I'm gonna do Alt, left square bracket, click on this triangle, and select top viewer. So now what happens is I get a window or portion of my TouchDesigner software program that is dedicated to seeing only the output. And what I can do is I can click and drag the middle, the place location where the panes are split, and I can go ahead and minimize that or just push it off to the side so it's not taking as much space. And this is possible because on my outputs operator, I have selected the display, what we call a flag. It's a little blue button, little blue circle towards the top right of that operator. When I click on that, it's going to go ahead and toggle that view on the right. So if I just turned it off, it's going to shut off. And if I turn it back on again, it's going to go ahead and show here. And I can show as many as I want, right? So it's going to continue to stack the more of these little flags, display flags that I turn on. Cool. So what I'm going to do is actually just go ahead and show our first steps here. And this is going to be our step number 1. And I'm going to go ahead and go to my new area of my network here. It's also a quick little thing I wanted to mention is the way I like to work is I like to use these bases pretty, I don't know, generously. And what these do is these just give us a way of organizing our program, organizing our network. And you can find these if you open up the operator create dialog by hitting tab. You're going to find these in the comp tab, and you'll see the base is under the other column. And again, these are, think of these as like empty folders that I can add and use and rename to organize all of my all of my different types of networks. So really cool way to organize and, you know, not have these really crazy, really large networks that are just running. So that's kind of what I've done here with this one. And I'm gonna go ahead and just minimize that so we don't see it. And I'm gonna enter this new space here. No worries if you don't want to organize it that way, that's completely okay. What you probably will see if you're following along is, if you open up TouchDesigner for the first time, you'll see probably a default network that happens every single time you open it. And so what you would do if you see that default network, and it should have like jelly beans on it in some way, is you can simply right click and drag to select all those operators and then just type delete or type out on your delete key. Another way is if you want to just easily delete all of the operators, you do Control A or Command A and then hit the delete key again. And that'll do the same thing, just delete everything that you see. Okay, so we have a fresh, clean space, fresh, clean network here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to build out the visuals that we see on the right-hand side. So we're going to go ahead and add a couple of operators here by hitting Tab once again to open up that Op Create dialog. And this time I'm going to go to the top menu. And real quickly, top stands for texture operator, and this operator family deals with everything that is rendered in 2D or everything that we see created using pixels. There are other operator families that we can see. They have really fancy, really cool acronyms like top, chop, sop, pop, pop, sop, chop, pop, lock and drop. You know, so yeah, there's so much to TouchDesigner. But for the purpose of this workshop, keeping it succinct, keeping it compact, we're going to focus on two of these families, the tops, which are texture operators, and then later on we'll talk about chops, which are channel operators. So under this top menu, you're going to see that there are different color-coded operators. They're all the same color, but they differ in shades. There are more darker shaded, like indigo blue colors, and there's also the lighter shaded indigo blue colors. This is a very important distinction to make right off the bat. The darker shaded operators that we see generate data, they create data. So you'll see something that, like, we see a circle option. We also over here will see a rectangle option. We'll probably also see another popular one is the video device in one as well, right? And these are all darker shaded. So this means that they are creating data for us to work with. All of the lighter shaded options here, they are responsible for editing or manipulating the data, or manipulating the data, manipulating the information here. So with that being said, let's go ahead and create the first generator of our example, which is the text that we see there. So I'm going to go ahead and search for text. You can visually scan for it, or you can also just start typing out the name of that operator, which is text. When you type it out, you'll see that most, if not all, of the operators become grayed out. And you'll see the ones that match your search stay highlighted. So this is a really quick and easy way, especially if you start getting into the groove of working, to find the operator you need and then to quickly add it to your network. We're going to kind of do it the slow way for the first couple of times just so we get used to adding these operators. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my mouse. I'm going to hover over text. And what's also really neat is at the bottom we get a description of what this operator does. The text top displays text strings in an image. It allows for multiple fonts, sizes, colors, borders. Very cool. So let's go ahead and add text. Let's drop it into our editor here. So we see that text is added and we have a default word that is here. So if you click on this operator to highlight it, what we can do is we can open up the parameter window. And the parameters actually give us more options in editing this this operator, editing this text. So if I type out the letter P for parameters, I'm gonna see my little parameter window open up. And you see there are a few tabs that are in this window. I'm gonna stick to the text tab for right now. And I'm gonna look for the parameter that's called text. And here we see we can actually edit this text. So the text that I have in my example is revolutionized. You can have whatever text that you want here. So I'm gonna go ahead and type out matcha. And once you're done, just hit enter, and then you'll see that update in your text operator viewer. A couple of other things that you can do is if your text is too long or it's too large for your viewer, you can toggle on this word wrap parameter, and that will automatically start a new line once you run out of room. Let's go over to font, because I do want to just cover very briefly some other things you can do with text. Is you can customize the font. So if you click on the drop-down menu for font, you're going to see all of the different options of font styles that are on your computer. Keep in mind, if you do switch it, sometimes it'll take a few seconds to load up. This happened to me a couple times where I click it and then everything freezes for a second. Just be patient, wait it out. It should update and come back. I'm not going to change the font though. I'm going to leave it here as default. Another parameter, another thing you could do is you can toggle the font size by just dragging the slider, make it larger, make it smaller. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. And there's some other options here, like changing the position using this position parameter. And you'll see here that there are two fields within this parameter. The first field represents the X position, and that's its position on the horizontal axis. And then the second one is the Y position, or its position on the vertical axis. I'm not going to mess with this. I like to have it in the center, but feel free to move this around at your discretion. Last thing is if I click up here on the color tab, I have the option of changing the font color. If I click open the color box there, I get a nice, neat little color picker. And this, we can see, allows me to either select from a preset grid of colors, or I can adjust either the HSV or the RGB values. So something to keep in mind and note when you are working with RGB and TouchDesigner is that they are arranged from 0 to 1. If you are used to working with RGB in other programs like Photoshop or Illustrator, they go from 0 to 255. So that's a big difference here with TouchDesigner, is that the value range is 0 to 1. So if you do have an RGB value that you want to bring into TouchDesigner, you should be able to just divide those by 255, and then that'll give you the equivalents, pretty close equivalent to what it is you're looking for. I'm just gonna make this maybe a gray. I'm not really gonna get too, well, why not? Let's go ahead and make this orange. Okay, so yeah, that is the text top, or the text operator. And as we're going through this, if you do have any questions, anything that comes up for you that you're wondering, hey, why is this happening? What did you do there? Feel free to drop your message in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer those for you. Okay, let's go ahead and add another operator here. Let's get this going. So I'm gonna next add an operator that's going to allow us to change some what we call transform properties for this text. And what I'm going to do is once again open up my operator family, operator create dialog. I'm going to search for transform. And I see once I search, everything becomes grayed out. And from here, I'm just going to go ahead and press enter. And that will automatically select the transform operator and then also automatically add it to my network. So there's a big difference here with transform. We noticed that when we first add it, we don't see anything in the viewer. And also, we don't, well, we see this red X up here. And if I click on the red X, I'm gonna see it says error, not enough sources specified. So this isn't working. And this actually comes back to what I had mentioned earlier, is that when we look at our create dialog, we see that there are two different types of operators here. There are ones that generate data and then ones that edit data. Transform, as we can see, is one of these lighter shaded colors, which means that it is actually responsible for editing data. So it's going to require an input. It's going to require a source image. And this is where the real fun happens with TouchDesigner, and really what makes it unique from traditional coding programs is that the way that we build out a program is by connecting these operators together. And we can think of this as data sort of maybe trickling down a stream. And every time it reaches the checkpoint, we can modify it in some way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna connect these two operators here. So text, we see both of these operators actually have two little, there's two little things happening on either end, on either side of this. We have the left side, which is the input, and then we have the right side, which is the output. So data travels in TouchDesigner from left to right, similar to how we would read a text. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the output of text, I'm gonna connect it into transform. And would you look at that, the error message goes away, and I see now the preview for my input here in transform as well. So if I open up the parameters for transform, we can see that there are some different options that we have. So keep in mind, the parameter window is going to change based on which operator that you have selected. So we can see if I keep this open and I click on text again, it's going to change and show me the parameters that are specific to the text operator. If I go back to transform, same thing, it's going to show me the parameters that are specific to this operator. And we see there's translate here, there's a rotate one, which we can see is happening actually in our goal on the right side. We can also change the scale as well. So I'm just gonna reset that to 0. We're not gonna touch this just yet, but it's gonna be important when we start to animate things. Okay, so the next thing we see here is, we see a circle and we see a triangle. We're gonna start with the circle first. So below my transform, I'm gonna go ahead and hit tab again, and I'm gonna add a circle top. Great, and for the circle top here, I'm gonna open up the parameters and I'm going to edit these values. So the radius determines the size of the circle, the first one being the width, the second field being the height. So I'm gonna make this 0.2 by 0.2. And that's gonna make it slightly smaller, which is perfect. I don't want it to be super, super large. Keep in mind that with these values, we are working in pretty small ranges. So if we are thinking like, okay, let's make this a value of like 10, you'll see that actually like now it looks like a rectangle. If I make this 10 by 10, now we just get a completely white square. Really the maximum here for the radius is 1. So anything below 1 is going to be visible and clearly defined within that viewer. So let's make that 0.2 by 0.2. And I'm actually gonna, you can make the fill color. This is the color of the actual circle, the shape. You can make this whatever you want. I'm gonna go ahead and just keep it as white for now. And I'm gonna leave it there. And we'll talk about how this goes back and forth between a triangle later on. But for now, we don't need to add another shape. We're just gonna add next this background gradient. So the operator for a gradient is going to be what we call a ramp top. And I like to call ramp the gradient operator. And before we talk about ramp, I'm actually going to go ahead and mute that audio because I realize it's been playing this entire time. Nice background music, but I don't want to get sick of it. Well, I mean, once you work with audio, especially the same audio file over a long period of time, I think that's kind of like natural. But yeah, let's just pause the audio for now so we can just focus on building our visuals. Cool. So the ramp here is going to be a gradient. And the parameter window is going to be, it's going to look a little bit different than what we're used to. We see the first thing is this color bar, and this is actually like the preview of the gradient. And we can see there's some small little markers or small little rectangles on either side of this color bar. And if you click on them, you can select that point of the gradient. And this is how we can customize the colors within our gradient by clicking on these little markers. So if I click on this first one, what I can do now, I can see that it is highlighted. It's now become white. And I can adjust this HSVA values. So the hue is going to determine what color I'm going to be using. And notice how nothing's really changing, even though I'm moving this hue value around. Well, what we need to do is bump up the value, and then from there, we can bump up the saturation so that we can make that color now visible. I'm just going to turn it all the way up to 1 for both of those. And yeah, so now we have some action going on. Let's go ahead and edit the end of my gradient by clicking on the far right marker. And I'm going to go ahead and make this a different color here. And I'm kind of just like going with what feels right, you know, so no wrong answer here. Let's say we want to further customize this gradient. Well, we can add additional markers on our color bar here by simply clicking on whatever point we want to add that. So you see I just clicked somewhere in the middle, and now another marker has been added. It's automatically highlighted, and from here, I can go ahead and adjust that color there. And let's make this a pretty dark one. I'm going to bump down the value a little bit, maybe turn up the saturation. There we go. And you can add as many of these markers as you want. To remove a marker, all you got to do is just click and drag it off of the color bar. I'm not going to release my mouse because I like that shade that I found there. But yeah, simply clicking on the color bar or clicking and dragging the markers away will either add or remove additional options here. There's some other things that we can customize, such as the type. We'll do that later. But for now, I'm going to just kind of leave this as is, because we have all of the pieces that we need to make this first part of our image. So the next operator I'm going to be adding is one that's going to combine all of these into a single section, into one single part here. And if I hit tab, this is going to be the composite top. So I'm going to search for composite. I'm going to add that here. And here we go. Again, we get this red X because composite is an operator that edits data. So it needs to have inputs. But notice how there is a big difference in this input for the comp operator. And that is, it's much bigger. And this means that it is a multi-input operator, which means that it can take up more than one. Which is really nice because we have 3 shapes that we want to add, or 3 visuals here. So what I can do is I can add these one by one to the input for comp. And that is not what I'm looking for, right? So the special thing to remember about comp is that there are different ways that we can combine these operators together. And if I look at the parameters, that way it's going to be with the operation parameter. So if I click on the drop-down menu for multiply, I'm going to see a ton of different options here. And I'm going to select over. Over is going to essentially stack these as layers. We have a top, a middle, and then a bottom layer. So you can see the way I connected these, matcha is on the top layer, this circle is in the middle, and then my ramp is on the bottom. If you maybe connected them in a different order, you can always just reorder the way that these are arranged by looking at the parameter for comp. And then you can see here, this is the actual order of the layers transforming on top, circle, ramp. And you can either click and drag these to reorder them, or you can move them up by clicking on this little up arrow next to the name for each. So I'm going to go ahead and move my transform back to the top there. You can also do it the long way if you want, by removing the connections. So to remove connections, if you hover over the wire, or we also call them noodles, if you hover over the noodle and you right click on that, you can select disconnect, and that's going to go ahead and disconnect that operator. I'm going to reconnect this, and I don't see matcha anymore. That's because it's on the bottom layer. So I can just simply move that up to the top, and now we are cooking. We are getting closer to this really cool example. Awesome. Yeah, and again, if you have any questions about this process, anything that maybe is also new to you, feel free to drop in the chat, like what the new thing that you learned is. I'd be really interested to see kind of what we're taking away from this. Okay, so we have the first step done. Let's go ahead and take a look at our example here and see what is next to do. And we're going to go ahead and build out this next portion, which is, again, we're not animating just yet, but we are going to start talking about a couple of other important and special operators in order to get this, to achieve this effect. Now, something I want to note is that take a look at the difference between, this is our first checkpoint. So the next step, we're actually going to be using an operator called lookup in order to recolor our original image. Cool. So that's going to be really fun to take a look at here. Cool. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a lookup top. And if I hover over the name, I can see the description. Lookup top replaces color values in the top image connected to its first input with values derived from a lookup table. All right, let's go ahead and add this, and let's go ahead and see how this works. So here's lookup. And again, I'm going to get this red X because it needs an input. And notice how lookup has two distinct inputs, right? There's a top one and there's a bottom one. Well, little cheat code here. If I hover my mouse over that first input, I get a little indicator that says this is the source image. And then if I hover my mouse over the second one, this is the lookup image. So before I start connecting these things together, I do want to show you exactly how lookup works, because it took me quite a minute to understand really how this comes together. And I'm going to be showing you this neat little image here. So we see this is an example. Okay, so it's the same kind of setup here, but instead I have an image that I'm using. It's a black and white image, and then I have my lookup over here to the right, and then at the bottom I have a gradient. So the way this works is you can't see the connections, but landscape 1 is connecting to the first input, ramp is connecting to the second input, and you can see the before and after. Okay, so really the landscape is the source image, and then we can see what lookup does, and it's recoloring my image. So this is all made possible by the lookup table, and in this case, and usually what you'll see is this lookup table being a ramp or a gradient. And for this example, we got a gradient that goes from red to blue. And the way this works is that lookup is going to read this gradient, and it's going to read it from left to right. Starting from the left, it's going to take the colors that are all on the left, and it's going to apply that to all the black tones of the source image. So if I move up here, we can see that I now have a nice little graphic with a little arrow. So this is red, and what's happening is that all these colors on the far left of this image are getting applied to all the black tones of my source image. And if I look at my output, we can see that in action, right? So we can see these parts of the mountains that are in shadow are actually adopting the color that's on the far left of my ramp. As I move over to the right, we get the far right part of the ramp, which is blue, and this is being replaced by all the white tones within the source image. So in this example here, all the white tones, like the really light tones, are like parts of the reflection, not reflection, parts of the lake here, also the sky. And we can see in the output, the final lookup here, it's the same, it's what we expect to see. So this part of the lake here is being replaced by the color blue, purple, and so is the sky. So everything in between, all the colors that are in the mid-range from left to the right, these are essentially working on a grayscale. So in the middle, we'll get like a completely like just a gray shade, which will be replaced by this specific tone that occurs from the transition within this gradient. So we can see how the lookup top gives us a lot of control over how these images are being recolored. We can get as complex as we want. We can be as straightforward, such as this, as we want. But this is where the real power of lookup comes. We can really think of it as a very specific and meticulous filter. A filter in which we can control which shades of the image are going to be replaced by which color. So that is lookup. And this is how we're going to be using it here. Is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to first, let's just connect this source image into the first input of lookup. And next, I'm going to make my lookup table, which in this case is going to be a ramp. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get pretty crazy with this ramp. You can keep it here. You can keep it just like a 2-part gradient, or you can add another marker as well, make it like a 3-part, just really customize this however you want. I'm going to go ahead and first, I'm going to create the gradient here. Let me bump up the value and saturation. I'm going to make this pretty red. And then I'm going to make the end of the gradient, let's make this black. And then I'm going to make one in the middle too, because I just want to make this maybe greenish. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to customize the way that this lookup table or this ramp behaves. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on ramp, and I'm going to change the type to circular. So what this does is this now it converts the ramp from a left to right gradient to one that radiates outwards. So it begins in the middle, and then the colors change as it moves up and out. And something else I'm going to do is I'm going to change the value for the period parameter. And if I just kind of experiment with this, I can see that the period is essentially either zooming in or zooming out of that here. So I'm going to go ahead and just, I'm actually not going to, let's make it like 1.46. I think that's the value I had. Let me double check over here. Actually, I had it pretty close to 1. I'm going to make this 1.03 there. Cool. We can also use phase, and that essentially acts as an offset. It's going to offset the starting point by a certain value, whichever value I choose here. I'm going to keep that 0. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and connect this to my second input for lookup. And wow, I get some pretty interesting results here. Yeah, so again, it kind of looks a little bit crazy, but we can think about the example I showed to really break down and explain how lookup comes together. So again, we have a lot more colors to work with here, but it's going to act in the same way. The left side of my ramp is going to apply to all of the darker shaded colors within my gradient. And the way this is set up is actually more of like a symmetrical thing. So we'll see that the left and right side like the far left side, the far right side are both going to be like black colors. So what I'm going to see is like my white circle is going to become a black circle. Also a little bit of the outlines. They stay the same pretty much. But everything in between, especially in the middle where we have like more of like the like neutral colors, are going to be adopted by this like red, orangish color as well. So that's really cool. Really cool thing about lookup. I can also adjust this, and you can see how much that changes. Right. If I make this a solid color, then I'm not going to have a lot of distinction or variety within my output. But yeah, pretty cool. That is the lookup top. The more that you play around with it, I think the more you'll find, the more you'll like understand and break down how it works. But really, for this example, the most clear indicator is like this white circle in the middle, because you can see that's green, and that's the color of this far right end of the ramp, of the gradient there. Very cool. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to add this little outline, this little ring that's around my inner circle here. So below my lookup, before I continue to build this out, I'm actually going to make another separate little branch, a little sub network, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Tab. I'm going to search for a circle. And yeah, we got another circle going on. And for this circle, I'm going to go ahead and customize this again. I'm going to just slightly bring down, actually a lot, bring down this value. That's actually going to be the same, 0.2 by 0.2. And that's pretty much all I'm going to do. I'm not going to change the color or anything because I just want to use this for the outline. To do that, I'm going to right click on the output. That brings up my operator create dialog once again. And then I'm going to go ahead and search for the edge top. And we can see the edge top detects the outlines of the input. So this is how I get that clean outline of the circle here. And this will, you can really feed anything into edge. It could be a rectangle, it could be in a whole image too. And with the image, if there's a more complexity to the image, a really helpful operator in the edge top is going to be strength. Because strength is going to really bump up the strength of the edge detection algorithm that is used within this top. We don't really need to change this at all because it's pretty easy for it to detect what a circle, the outline of a circle is. So I'm going to leave that alone. Then lastly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here and add another transform. And again, at this point, all I'm doing is just typing out the name of the operator I want to add and then pressing enter. And that's just, you see how kind of quick that comes together. Really, really neat, really, really nice there. Okay. And for this, I'm going to just turn up the scale slightly. So I'm going to make this, instead of 1, the scale is going to be 1.6 by 1.6. Because I want it to be around, I don't want it to be the same size. I do want it to be like around that. And I added transform just in case I want to go ahead and edit this if I decide to later on. Nice. So the last thing we have to do here is connect my lookup and the transform. So I want us to be able to see this outline. So this time I'm going to add an over top. And over is going to combine 2 operators together. You can see over, again, it has 2 distinct inputs. And this is determined by, this determines the layers. So for this case, I actually am going to want the top layer to be my outline. Because otherwise, this matcha layer is going to just cover the entirety of that. So the matcha is going to be the second input there. Perfect. Looks pretty good. I'm going to bump up the transform just a little bit more. Maybe make this 1.8 by 1.8. Perfect. Just so I have a little bit more space in between there. Okay, hopefully we're all doing okay. Yeah, I think we're going to go about maybe 90 minutes, hour and a half. I can see that we're definitely making some good progress. But yeah, again, if there's anything that you have questions about, anything that you are maybe learning for the first time, definitely let me know. I'd love to see your input, your feedback. All right, let's continue on forward. So last thing we see, there's like some distortion going on with the image. And this is going to be another really cool effect that we'll be learning here. So this is going to be made possible by what we call the displace top. So I'm going to add the displace top over here. And once again, displace has two distinct inputs. The first is going to be the source. And let's actually take a look at the description for displace, just so we know what it is that we're getting ourselves into here. So if I hover my mouse, displace top will cause one image to be warped by another image. That sounds really fun. So this first input is the source. The second input is going to be what we're going to warp it or distort it with. And this is a very similar train of thought when it comes to also our conversation about the lookup top. Lookup had a first input, which was the source, the second input, which is how we were editing or changing the source. Same thing here for displace. The first input is the source, and then the second input is going to be how we are changing this source. And in this case, it's going to be applying a displacement operation to it. Now, you can really put anything you want here as the second input. It's really common to see this input with a noise top. So I'm going to go ahead, search for noise, and noise top generates a variety of noise patterns. And we can see the noise top is one of those darker shaded operators here. And here we go. Very cool. So with noise, I get what I like to call and describe as a semi-random arrangement of pixels. It's semi-random because it's really hard to replicate randomness with software. It takes a lot of computing power to do so. So what instead is actually happening is that we are getting a predetermined assortment of pixels that appear to be random. And we can see like the randomness is, in this case, like the color of the pixels. We see that there's like, it's in the grayscale, so it ranges from black to white. And if I open up the parameters here, there's a lot of really cool ways that I can edit the way that this noise appears. And this is found under the type section. And there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different types of noise you can generate here. And I like to kind of just like select some and see what they do. And you can see some of these, especially these per-lin options, they give you a lot more blur as opposed to this simplex, which is a lot more sharp. There's also like a random, which is like, it just basically looks like static here. But I'm going to go ahead and keep it at, let's do simplex 3D. The next parameter here is the seed. And the seed just determines the pattern of which these pixels are arranged, or the colors of which the pixels are arranged. And you can see that kind of like just gives us a variety of different options. I'm going to just kind of just leave this at a random value. Then we're going to go down to period. And if I toggle the slider for period, you can see we just get the effect of it zooming in or zooming out. So you can have this whatever kind of value you want, because we are going to be editing this later on. And the last one here I want to talk about is the amplitude. And we can see amplitude has the effect of sharpening the contrast. So if I bump the amplitude up, it's actually going to look, a lot of the grays are going to disappear. If I bump it down, it's going to become more gray. So I kind of like it being pretty sharp there. Again, amplitude is another one that we're going to be editing. Okay, so that's pretty much my noise. Now, if I go ahead and connect this to displace, the second input of displace, I get a pretty big jumble of things happening here. But we can see evidence of the original source image in my displace top viewer. So with displace, we can actually determine how much the image is being distorted. So if I open up the parameters for displace, I'm going to look at the displace weight parameter. And this has 3 parameters. Oh, that's new. I think this became new with like the newest version of TouchDesigner. So there's only ever always been 2. And what I could do is I'm going to make this a very, very small number. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to click and hold my mouse on the displace weight text. And I get this mini menu up here. And this is showing me how much I want to change the value in increments. So I'm still holding down my mouse. If I hover my mouse down, that is going to, I can choose which increment I want to change it by. And then I can move it to the left or to the right. So I'm going to move it left. And you can see the more I move it, ooh, look, the more it gets back to the original image. So I'm going to make it, maybe I like 0.09. There's definitely evidence, like I can still for sure see that it's the original image, but I really like how the distortion is happening with that value. And this could be, again, whatever you want it to be, that displace weight parameter. And cool, that is our second checkpoint here. Hopefully things are moving along pretty smoothly for everybody. Again, let me know if there's any questions that you all think of while we are working through this. So the last part of the visuals, and we're almost done, is just adding some like post effects here. In our example, we have this little chain that we have that's just going to give it some additional features that make it look like this more kaleidoscope kind of effect here. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle on that final output. So we know we are almost to the finish line here. Cool, so I have this chain of effects here, and these are pretty cool effects to tweak here. The first operator I'm going to add here is the level top. And the level top comes with a lot of settings that we find common in like photo editing software like Photoshop. We see that we can adjust black levels, brightness, gamma, contrast, and this really is like finishing touches for whatever you are building, whatever visuals that you are building here. So for this, I just bumped up the brightness just a little bit, 1.2, and then I also bumped up the contrast just to make this image a little bit more sharp. I think I made that pretty much almost 2. Yeah, 1.9 looks really good. Cool. And that is level. There's also some other really cool things you can do in the post tab for level, which is the opacity. And that just adjusts the transparency of the image. Really cool, especially if you're like wanting to like mix colors together, mix shapes together. I find that the opacity is very useful in that vein. Cool. So next thing I'm going to use here is tile. And we can see tile gives us that like duplicated effect. And what I can do with tile is I'm actually going to open up the parameters here and look at tile. We can see the max times we can repeat it is 4 or 2, excuse me. So if I do try changing it to 4, it's not going to do anything. But if I go over here to tile, I'm actually going to go ahead and flip on the X and flip on the Y. And then also let's just do the reflections here too. So essentially what this does is just kind of like makes them all look like they're looking towards like the center. So it gives a really nice like reflective quality to these tiles. And this is, I think, where a lot of the kaleidoscope similarities come into play here. So a little trick I'm going to do is I want to make more duplicates of this. So I'm going to hit tile one more time. And yes, now we got a duplicate of a duplicate. And same settings I'm going to apply to this tile. Actually, no, I'm going to leave it alone because I like that. You can, if you want to, go ahead and go back to the tile tab and then see what happens when you flip all those on. yeah, looks pretty cool. And the last operator here to finish off our visuals is going to be the null top. Null top is very important because it marks the end of this portion of our network. Doesn't do anything. Null does not have any kind of like purpose outside of it signifying the end. It's a nothing operator. And that is it. That is our visuals. Look how far we've made it. Yeah, so a couple of like important operators that we covered here were the lookup top and then also the noise top. These were pretty new, and displace, of course. But yeah, these are pretty new ones. I think they're really important, and especially if we begin to like really know how to use these, I think they can become really powerful operators within our tool set. Awesome. So yeah, this time, take a little break here. Also just kind of make some room if there's any questions that anybody has that y'all want to ask, or anything else you have on your mind. How you doing? What's going on? Feel free to let me know. In the meantime, I'm just going to go ahead and just do a quick little stream check. Make sure everything's looking good. Everything seems to be perfect now. Yep, excellent. I'm getting excellencies on the stream health for everything. So yeah, really, really cool. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and pause my TouchDesigner so it's using up a little bit less of resources here. But yeah, again, we have quite a lot of things that we accomplished here. Really cool visuals. And right now, yes, it is going to be static. I'm actually going to turn on the preview here. And I'm going to make this now a double. I'm going to actually make this a double preview here. Make this a top viewer. And then let me go back. Here we go. So the top, we have the goal that we're working towards, and the bottom is where we're currently at. So again, these are like, it's the same process, but the visuals are going to be different just because I'm like also changing things as I go. But the same should also be true for you. Yours might look a little bit different, but again, as long as we're following sort of the same order of things, then you should be in a good place. Okay, so before we move on to talking about chops and how we can animate and also the audio reactivity of this network, I do want to take a moment here to talk about my mini course. I've dropped the link in the chat. I can also do that one more time here so that you can also have the access to it. Give me 1 second while I do that. But yeah, let's go ahead and look at it together. I'm going to go ahead and bring it over here. Nice. Okay. Oh, where'd it go? There it is. All right, so this is my mini course landing page, and it is going to be a course. It's starting on 23rd of this month, March 23rd. It's a Monday. And this is going to be a 4-week course, which is why it's called a mini course. And for this course, there's going to be a few important aspects to it. One is that it is going to be an asynchronous course, which means that we're not going to be doing live sessions, but instead, what you'll be provided with every week is a set of video lessons or video tutorials that you'll be working through on your own pace. And that's really why I like the format of doing pre-recorded videos, is that you can work on your own pace. You can pause. You can do a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon. And yeah, I really like that format. I find it really successful in the past. Some other things that are going to be included in this course are also assignments. So this is a 4-week course. So the first 3 weeks, you're going to have smaller assignments that help you practice the things that we learned for that week. The last week is going to be a bigger project that helps you bring everything together into your own project, something that you can add to your creative portfolio. And this is going to be focused on, again, audio reactivity. So you'll be making your own visuals, you'll be getting your own audio, not making your own, but you'll be finding your own audio that you want to be able to influence the visuals with. The last aspect of the course is going to be the community support. So there will be a Discord that you'll be a part of, a Discord community, Discord server, and that is where we'll be communicating, right? So it's not one of those courses where I kind of just give you the videos and you're on your own. But this is really more of a structured course in that you have 4 weeks allocated to work through these videos, to work through these assignments. And then from there, as you have questions or as questions come up for you, you have Discord that you can post questions in, which I'll of course be in the Discord as well as the other people who are enrolled in the course with you. So yeah, going through this landing page, there's going to be a lot of information that you can see, especially defining or describing like who the course is for. And really this is meant for beginners to TouchDesigner. So if you're not super familiar with it, maybe you've opened it a couple times, but there's a lot of demystifying that you want to happen. There's a lot of things that you want to understand more deeply about, specifically tops and chops. This is going to be the course for you. Here in this what you get section, there's again everything I just mentioned, the video lessons, the assignments, the project, the Discord. Also, if you purchase the course, you get lifetime access to everything that's included. Especially for this iteration of the course, you actually get access to all the updates for this 4-week audio reactive course. There's also going to be, of course, downloadable resources. So I'll be giving you all of the TouchDesigner projects that we cover in the videos. There'll be starter TouchDesigner files. There'll be cheat sheets, reference guides, all to help you within your TouchDesigner journey. You'll see the curriculum here as well. So there's going to be 4 weeks, so 4 modules, and you'll see the details for each module, what we'll be covering, what we will be learning. Some other things to check to see if this is for you or not. And yeah, this is mainly, again, as I mentioned, for complete beginners, or if you're self-taught but haven't really gotten too deep into TouchDesigner, then this is going to be really helpful to you. If you are pretty familiar with TouchDesigner, then it's also going to be helpful to you as well, because I find that there's always something new to learn about TouchDesigner. There's always something that's, oh, like I did not know that was a thing. So I find those moments are really helpful. This is not for you if you're an advanced TouchDesigner user. So if you're building out projects left and right, if you're doing installations, if you consider yourself to be someone who's very experienced with TouchDesigner, then this is not going to be for you. We also won't be covering 3D in this course. 3D is the SOP and the POP family. But maybe in future courses, this is something that we'll focus on. Also going to be no one-to-one mentorship, so no one-on-one calls. You will have the support within Discord, and I'll be part of that support. But yeah, the one-on-one mentorship is not going to be part of this course. Also, if you're not able to commit a certain number of hours per week to this, then also I would think about, maybe the next time this course is run, that's something that you can hop in on. I'm thinking the next time this will run will be maybe late spring or even early summer, just depending on the timeline, depending on things. Here's a little bit about me. If you're curious to know who I am, where I come from, my experience, and like really what gives me the right to run a course like this, here it is. I'm an educator. I've taught at university for about 5 years now. So I definitely have a lot of experience in the classroom, with curriculum, with teaching. So this is something that I think is really important to note. I'm not just like a rando who pretends to know what TouchDesigner is, pretends to have taught things, because I do have that experience. I'm also an active artist. I've linked my art portfolio here as well. So if you want to take a look at some of my projects, those are there for you as well. So here is the reveal for the deal of this course. So right now we are in the early bird registration, which is at 147. Again, you're getting this 4 weeks worth of content, you're getting the videos, you're getting support in Discord. After early bird, it's going to go up to its normal price of 177. The course, again, is going to start on the 23rd of March. Registration is going to end the day before. And then the early bird pricing is going to end March 16th. So that is a week before the course begins. So if you are interested, I would definitely recommend taking advantage of the early bird registration. And if you are interested, this button here will take you to the cart where you can check out and make your investment. And here's some FAQs, some things that we covered here, but also if we didn't cover it within this quick little spiel, you should be able to find the answers here. If there's a question you have that is not listed here, you can always reach out to me. My email you can find at the bottom of this page here. So that is the details of the TouchDesigner Mini-course. Again, let me know if you have any questions. The early bird ends the 16th of March. The course starts on the 23rd. And yeah, I'm really excited to be running this, really excited to be diving into this mini course here. And yeah, again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me on social media. You can email me. I'd be more than happy to answer whatever questions that you may have. Awesome. So without further ado, we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break, and then we're gonna dive into the last part of this workshop here, which is all about the animation and the audio reactivity. So give me, 5 minutes or so, and we will be right back. And we are back. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and stop that music from playing so we can continue on. So this last portion of this workshop is going to be about animation and also the audio reactivity. So I anticipate this maybe going maybe about 20-30 more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up from there. So to this point, we have finished off all of the visuals, so we are done. Now it really comes down to adding the sprinkles, adding the animation, and some audio reaction here. So the first thing I want to do is just talk about chops. And I'm going to go ahead click towards the beginning part of my network where I have my matcha. And I'm going to go ahead and hit tab again. But this time, instead of looking at the top menu, I'm going to switch on over to the chop menu. So chop is this green menu, and chop stands for channel operators. And when we think about channel operators, really we think about ways that we create, again, in the same vein of tops, we think about how we create data, we generate it, we manipulate it, and we process it. When it comes to chops, we can think of this as, once again, data, but this time this is data that depends on the passage of time. So with this time-based data with chops, we can do things like drive animations. We can change values over time. We can also think about using building interactive systems with chops. We can also think about processing some kind of input data. So mouse interaction, keyboard interaction, or audio input as data, motion capture, right? So chops really make interaction and just live dynamic things possible. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to talk about the noise chop. So I'm going to type out noise here in my menu. And noise chop makes an irregular wave that never repeats, with values approximately in the range of -1 to +1. So let's go ahead and add a noise chop here. So we see in the noise chop, this viewer looks much, much different than what we are used to within the top viewers. Instead here, actually, before I move on to noise, I do want to talk about resolution now that we're done with the visuals. Because as you can see, especially with the output of my window over here, resolution isn't the best quality. It's very blurry, a little bit grainy. So resolution determines the quality of the image. And when we think about adjusting resolution, we want to think about adjusting this for all of the operators that generate data. So in this case, text, circle, ramp, like all these generate data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control, or you can hold down Shift, and I'm going to go ahead and click to select all of the operators that generate data. So text 1, circle, ramp, my other ramp 2, my circle 2. I'm going to go over here, my noise. So those are all the operators that are giving me creating data for me to use. Once all those are selected, I'm going to hit P for parameters. So you'll notice that the parameter actually reflects the text, but if we go over here to the common tab, these are the parameters that all of the operators have in common. And if I look at the resolution, I can see I can punch in numbers here. The default resolution is 256 by 256, which is actually not the best quality. So what I'm going to do here is if I click on this drop-down menu, I'm going to select 1280 by 720. And wow, look at the difference in that quality here on this bottom right preview. So that is 100 times better, or technically it's 1,000 times better. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so we just improved the resolution quality of our image. Now with TouchDesigner, if you're like me and if you're on the free version, then we are going to be limited in our resolution. And I selected 1280, by 720 because that is actually the maximum resolution that we can use with the free version of TouchDesigner. You will see, however, that there are higher options like 1920 by 1080. There's 3840, 4096. And you can still select these, but it'll give you a warning that these are just going to be limited anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and I selected 1280 by 720. And that is good enough for me because that looks 100 times better. It looks perfect. And that is resolution. So if you do happen to miss like one generator operator, then what's going to happen is your resolution is not going to line up. So just make sure you cover all of the generator operators there. Perfect. So let's go back to noise. We can see here that this noise gives me a waveform. And as the description mentioned, the waveform is not really predictable and it doesn't repeat itself. So with this, we can think of this as just a lot of values that occur over samples. So what I want to do is I actually want to make this move. So I'm going to open up the parameters for noise. I'm going to go to the common tab and I'm going to turn time slice on. And if I make sure my TouchDesigner program is actually playing, I can see these values start to change. Now, the description said it typically will run from a range of -1 to +1. That's going to be important to keep in mind, especially when we think about how I want to use this data. So now this viewer looks a little bit different as well. I can see on the left side is a value. I'm going to pause by typing out space here. And I can see that value, 0.0498, -0.873, 0.0. So I can pause this at any point. I'm going to see a different value. The right side of this gives me the channel name. And this is the channel or the avenue in which this value is being output. So what we're going to do now is I want to actually map this change of value to my rotation of my matcha. So I want my matcha to rotate, but I want it to rotate in relation to what this noise value is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click on the output of noise and I'm going to search for the chop called math. And with math, we can perform mathematical operations on the value. So I'm going to see here that when I think about rotation and rotating things, this is in degrees. So you can see there's a pretty large values, right? 360 being one full rotation. If I look at this, and then I also look at the current range for noise, as it said in the description, it's going to go from -1 to +1. And that's nowhere near large enough to be able to map to rotation and to see a difference. So with math, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this I'm going to go to the range tab. And the way that this range works is that this is essentially a mapping function. So I have a from range set of parameters and then a to range set of parameters. From range we can think of is the range of the input. In this case, this is the range of the noise, which we know is approximately -1 to +1. And this to range is the new range that we want to map that value to. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this, and I can really make this whatever I want, right? Depending on how much I want my text to rotate, I know this is going to be some kind of range between 360 and 0. So let's make this something like 90 to 180. We can see that edits itself now, and now these values are much larger and they're much easier. They're going to be much easier to work with. I want to talk about, we'll see what this looks like and then we'll make adjustments as we go. The last thing I want to add here is a null chop. And this is very similar to the null top in that it is going to do nothing. It's just going to signify the end of this little chain here. I'm going to go ahead and just select these three and just rearrange them. And now I'm going to do something very special. And I'm going to go ahead and map this noise value to that transform parameter. So the first step is I'm going to click on transform to open up the parameter window. Then I'm going to look at my null2 chop, and I'm going to pay attention to the bottom right button of that operator, which is a little plus symbol. And if I hover over it, it's going to say viewer active. If I click on that, you'll see that the actual outline of the operator disappears. And when I hover my mouse, it highlights. This means that I can now drag this value to somewhere else. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and click and drag this. I'm going to go ahead and hover my mouse over rotate. And I'm going to release my mouse. And I'm going to select chop reference. And there it is. So now that noise is driving the rotation of my matcha. So I'm noticing how there's not really a lot of fluctuation with this value. And this is where I find that the -1 to +1 noise range is not super accurate. What I find to be more accurate is maybe -0.4 to +0.4. Now I see there's a lot more variation in that rotation. I'm also going to adjust the range. Let's make it 0 to 180. So I feel like if I make it 90, it's majority of the time it's going to be upside down. So yeah, I'm going to make that 0 to 180. And that's pretty cool. Looking pretty fun there. And I can see that also happening in my output down here. I'm actually going to close this one now, the top one, because we're getting pretty close to being done here. Very nice. Very cool. So the next thing I want to do with animation is I want to go ahead and make this circle switch back and forth between a triangle and a circle. So if I look at the circle top, the parameter that's going to make this possible is the polygon. So if I turn polygon on, you can see that these next few parameters become available to edit. Specifically, the sides becomes available. And sides by default is 3, and this gives me polygon with 3 sides, which is a triangle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find a way to map another chop value to turn this polygon on and off. So I'm going to be sticking around right here. I'm going to the left of the circle. I'm going to add an LFO chop. LFO. And I'm going to add that here. So LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. It creates a more consistent, predictable wave. In this case here, it's going from left to right. The value in this case is going to be -1 to +1. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the type of this LFO to square. And now with square, we can see it's going from 1 to -1. There's no in-between values. So it's switching from -1 to +1, almost like a switch. And from here, I'm not going to need to do any math. All I'm going to do is simply activate my viewer there, click and drag that onto polygon at the chop reference. And now I have my circle, which is automatically turning into a triangle. What I am going to do is I'm going to increase the scale of my matcha just a little bit. There we go, just to make that a little bit bigger, a little bit more fun over here on the right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this because I have not saved this entire time. Very important to remember to save your work because anything can happen at any time. Your network can crash, your computer can crash, and you can lose everything. So make sure to save often, save frequently. Great, so now we are ready for audio reactivity. So what I'm going to do is, first thing, I'm going to just add audio. And to add audio, again, we are dealing with input data. So I'm going to open up my chop menu, and I'm going to search for audio file in. We can see there's some action going on here. So there's already an audio playing. We just can't hear it yet. So the way that we're going to be able to hear this is by adding an audio device out chop. And also, if you misspell it or leave out spaces, it probably won't find the match. Before I connect these, I'm going to go ahead and just adjust the volume first because it's going to be pretty loud if I just connect it right now. So for audio device out, I can open up the parameters and I can change the volume to be, let's make it 0.5. And then I want to connect audio file in to the first input of audio file or audio device out. And now I should be able to hear that audio playing, which we do. Let me turn it down just a little bit, just so it's not overpowering my voice. Perfect. Okay, so we have audio file in, we have audio device out. I'm gonna go ahead and make some space here, make some room. And let's talk about how we can start to parse this audio and actually do some audio analyzing, because that is how we're going to be able to detect, in this track at least, the kick drum or the bass drum and then the snare drum. So on the left, I'm going to open up my palette. It's hard to describe, but it looks like a little, I don't know, like a little floor with an arrow coming up. But yeah, it's just a little button over here towards the left, right next to like the mountain button or the triangle. I always thought it was a mountain, but now it kind of looks like a box with like a triangle inside of it. Anyways, once I have my palette open, I'm going to go ahead and select my tools. And from tools, I'm going to click and drag this audio analysis into my network. Now I can close my palette out. So here we go. Audio analysis. This operator is very useful because it does a lot of the work for us in terms of isolating certain sounds or certain instruments. We can see that we can go inside and take a look at what's happening by double clicking on it. And pretty crazy, right? So I'm gonna go back up and leave that. Another way that you can leave is just by scrolling out until you leave this area there. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna connect my audio file in right into my audio analyzer. And to interact with this little interface, I'm gonna wanna turn my viewer active to be back on. Now I can actually interact with this interface here. So I'm gonna actually turn off this button for low because I just wanna focus on kick and snare. Well, let's start with kick first. We have a little indicator here that shows us when it's detecting an actual kick drum. And the reason why I like this track is because there's a very clear like bass hit. Cool. So I do notice that this is going off a little bit more than I would want it to. So what we can do is actually turn up the knob for threshold to make it a lot more picky on when it gets triggered. So it's pretty high. If I turn it up too high, it's actually not going to detect anything. So it's going to be almost at the like 3/4 mark there. Cool. And let's go ahead and do the same thing for snare. I'm going to turn that threshold up. Perfect. And let's go ahead and turn this viewer active back off by clicking on that plus symbol once again. So this first input, I'm gonna right click and I just wanna be able to see what's going on here. So I'm gonna add a null chop. And here I can see we have a few more channels. Looks similar to like our LFO and our noise chops, but this one just has more channels of data. So I can see that the two main ones that are having a lot of activity are kick and snare. And those are the two that I'm actually going to be working with here. So I'm going to move this down just a little bit more so I have some space. And first, I want to be able to isolate kick on its own and snare on its own. So I'm going to right click on the output for null. I'm going to add a select chop. Select is going to allow us to only have one operator or one channel visible here. So for select, if I go to channel names, drop that down, I can select kick. And I do the same thing. So if I go once again, let me try right clicking. Let's add another select. Okay, I don't want to do that. I'm going to middle mouse click, add select. And that creates a separate branch. Instead of kick, this time I'm going to go up here to channel names. I'm going to select snare. That's really fun. So now I have one specific operator for kick and then one specific operator for the snare. So what I want to do here now is I'm going to choose, I want to play with noise a little bit. And I think what I want to do is I want to map the kick to, let's see what I want to map it to. I want to map the kick to amplitude. So here's amplitude, right? Here's what that affects, how that affects my image. Okay, so it's really the amounts, we can think of it as like the contrast of the noise. So I want this really just to go from 0 to 1. That's going to be the range that I want it to go in between. And this is going to be affected and controlled, driven by my snare. Right? Excuse me, my kick. So for kick, it looks like it's going from 0 to 1 already, which is perfect because all I need to do now is just have a little bit of like a gradual transition between these values. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and I'm going to add let's add a lag chop. So lag is one way that we can smooth out these values. With lag, we can actually control the amount of time it takes to reach the value and then the amount of time it takes to come back from that value. So in this case, I'm going to reduce the amount of time because I noticed it's not really going all the way to 1. And I want it to also take a little bit more time to come back down. So we'll see what that looks like. We can always come back and edit what that looks like and how that affects the amplitude there. So I'm going to add a null because I'm done with this. And we're going to go ahead and practice mapping this now to my noise. I'm going to select my amplitude, chop reference that. And here's what that looks like. Again, this is the kick. So it looks like I'm going to turn down the threshold just a little bit. Because it wasn't going off entirely for the whole time. Cool, so now we can see that every time we hear that kick, which is pretty much on every downbeat, that's going to adjust my amplitude. Cool. I'm going to adjust my lag values now. I'm going to make this maybe 0.4 so it comes back a little bit quicker. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. And there we go. So that is one way we can apply that. So the second place, I'm going to map this snare to something as well. And I want the snare to go to the period parameter of my noise. So if I play with the period, I can see that the period is actually zooming in and zooming out, right? So if that's all the way to 0, it's really like very staticky. If it's all the way up to like 2, it's very much zoomed in. So I'm going to actually choose a nice range for this. Let's see what I've used previously. Let's make it maybe like 0. I don't want it to go all the way out because then that really makes it like not noisy at all. Let's make it like 0.15 and make that go all the way up to 1. Okay, 0.15 to 1. Make sure to remember that because I might forget. So in this case, we're going to need to use math again. And for math, if I go to range, 0 to 1, that's the range of the snare input, which I don't need to touch. I'm going to adjust the new range though, which I said was 0.15 to 1. Once I do that, I'm going to once again add another lag chop. And let's make this a similar value, 0.1, 0.4. And we can adjust that as we go. The last thing is going to be null. And let's go ahead and map this to my period. Cool. So now every time that snare hits, I'm gonna see that period change. Looks really fun. And this is kind of what it looks like. Just looking at the noise, at least. I'm gonna save my work as we go as well. Very cool, very fun. And there we have it. This is our final, I'm gonna full screen this. Our final output. This is our matcha rave, if you will. So yeah, definitely went over the hour. We're almost close to an hour 45 now. But yeah, that is audio reactivity in TouchDesigner. Hopefully you learned something new in this video. If you have no idea what TouchDesigner is, then definitely, hopefully, kind of like open up your world. If you do know TouchDesigner, maybe you learned a few different new things here, which I hope you do. Please let me know what you learned. You can drop it in the comments or in the chat. Something else that I want to say, I know it's like something like a meme kind of thing to say now, but I would really, really appreciate it if you liked the video, and also consider subscribing if this is the type of things that you like to see and learn about. And it, it just really helps me a lot with being able to gain traction and reach more people. So yeah, with that being said, thank you all so much for tuning in. And again, the mini course is officially launched, and I have the links in the chat. I'll also drop it in the description as well. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you next time. All right, take care, everybody.